Hi, everyone. Karen Roby and Stephen Vaughan-Nichols here for ZDNet. And Stephen, you were fortunate enough to go to the Linux Plumbers Conference this year here and wrote a great article for us here for ZDNet about, you talked with many of the top programmers there, and many of them saying, you know, they universally agree that Microsoft wants to control Linux, but they're not worried about it. So you put together an article all dedicated to this. So just start a little bit about the conference and some of the people you talked to there and the general sentiment.
Well, the conference itself is an invite-only conference for the people who make Linux work. It's called Linux Plumbers because it really is the people who do the dirty work of making sure that it all actually works. It's not sexy, it's not glamorous, but it's what you need to do to actually make the operating system go. And you can do a lot with mailing lists and IRC and all that, but sometimes you just have to meet in person. So I'm lucky enough that I'm one of the few press people who was invited to go to this. And while I was there this time, I talked with Linus Torvalds and Greg Hartman and James Bottomley and a lot of the top developers. They're not household names, but they're the people who make Linux work. And one of the things that is a really popular, I don't know whether you would call it a rumor, but a lot of people believe still that Microsoft's only interest in Linux is to embrace it, extend it, and then extinguish it. And certainly that used to be Microsoft's modus operandi. If there was some really neat technology, they would try to take it over and then kill it. But that's not the Microsoft of today. I mean, that's not, you know, Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer aren't around anymore. And Microsoft has realized that Linux really does run the world. It's, you know, all the clouds you use, pretty much every website from Google on down, all run on Linux. And they've realized they need to be part of the party as well. So for the last almost 5 years, Microsoft has been working closely with Linux. But again, there's a lot of people go, oh no, they're going to just destroy Linux. We know they're going to destroy Linux. But so I thought, well, let's ask Linus et al. What's really going on here? And they just said, nope, that's not true. These people, sure, they want to have their say in how Linux is put together and how it runs. But you know what? So does IBM, so does Red Hat, so does SUSE, so does Google, so does Amazon. Everybody wants to control Linux. But you know what? They can't. It's by the very nature of how Linux is put together. Everyone has to cooperate. Everyone has to work together. Microsoft can come in and say, oh, I want to extend Linux in this way. It doesn't matter. You can make that suggestion. You can write that code. But if everybody else doesn't agree, that code doesn't get put in there. So you have to work with other people to get your code in there, whether you're Microsoft or some other company. Microsoft knows this now. Microsoft is doing this. And so this whole thought that somehow Microsoft is going to ruin it, they're going to poison everything, you know, it's just the top Linux developers simply don't see that happening at all. In fact, they think the idea is really rather silly, and that it shows that people who are saying that don't really understand how Linux, or for that matter, any major open source program really works and is really created.
Yeah, and that would take me to my next thought here, a question, Stephen, in that when you talk about those people that are making comments about this very thing, those are the ones too that are often commenting on your stories. And as you mentioned there in the article, that as soon as you put something out there, they're going to jump on it in this way. So what are some of the things that people say to you when you put this out there?
Oh, that I'm just naive, that Microsoft is still the evil empire, as Mary Jo Foley liked to call it back in the day. And they're just sneaky people. They have no real interest in Linux. It's just all a great con that they're playing. And I am some foolish idiot for believing that they could ever the Microsoft Leopard could ever change its spots. Newsflash, Microsoft, the Leopard can change its spots. It's 2019. This is not the Microsoft of 1999 or 2009. And again, it's not just me seeing this. It's the people who actually make Linux work. And for that matter, it's all these other companies that are rivals to Microsoft. It's not a Linux example, but I was also recently at a conference about open networking. And so you had companies like British Telecom and AT&T and Verizon. And as anyone who watches TV knows, these companies hate each other. They are always bad-mouthing each other in all their advertisements and so on. But to be successful with their networks, they have to work together on these open source software-defined networking projects. So while they may stab each other as much as they can in their advertising and in their marketing, when it comes to actually getting the work done, they have to work together. And that's exactly what they do. And when you go back to Linux and so on, which has been around for almost 30 years now, still new companies do come in and think, oh, they have to fight with others or they have to try to control things. But that's just not how Linux or any other major open source project works.
Yeah, and there's no question, Stephen, that Linux is now the driving force for most all technology companies. And so, what did the guys there, the gals there that you talked to, what do they see as the future? What are they working towards?
They're just really working towards just improving the system. I mean, the word plumbers used to be about more of the peripheral stuff around Linux, but anymore, Linux has become sort of the plumbing, the infrastructure of all technologies. All your websites for well over a decade now have been running on Linux. All the clouds, including Microsoft Azure, really either run on Linux or the virtual machine instances that run on these platforms are Linux. My favorite example of that is that on Azure, Microsoft's very own baby public cloud system, Linux is now the most popular virtual machine on it. It's not Microsoft Server, it's Linux. And so what's happened is that, well, this is important for the people who deal with the nuts and bolts of technology. People don't really see it that much. Linux really is becoming the plumbing underneath the surface. You don't think about it because it's just there and it works. So their job, as they see it, is to make darn sure that it works as well as possible and is as flexible and as open as possible. And they're doing a good job of that. Particularly one thing they're working hard on right now, because I saw a lot of people dealing with this at the show, is they're trying to bring Linux into the continuous integration and development world, CI/CD, which means they need to put in a lot of inline testing. And that's not easy because this is a really old code base with a lot of oddities still buried in it. So you have to sort of practice a little code archaeology at times to work things out. But they're working hard on inlining testing and so on, and that's still very much a work in progress.
Very good. All right, Stephen. Well, it's been great talking to you. This is an interesting perspective since you were able to go to that conference, and interesting to hear what they really feel about what's going on there with Linux. So if you'd like to read more about his experience there from the conference from Stephen, make sure you check out the full article on ZDNet. Thanks for watching.